if other funding sources are not available. In the 2025 alternative budget, we are projecting $5.6 million in cuts to services, in addition to the $3.4 million that's in the executive operating budget. That will impact at least 18 full-time positions and cause deep reductions in support for community-based nonprofits. It also projects a $1 million reduction in Metro Transit's budget. The council will look at both of these budgets and have the opportunity to amend them through the Finance Committee process, and then again in November when the budget comes to the council floor. By then, we'll know which budget we're working with, and we will either introduce the executive operating budget or an omnibus amendment to include cuts. I want to close by reiterating that I believe that the job of local government is to invest in the infrastructure and the services and the people that underlie economic success and quality of life for our residents. That is what the City of Madison has tried to do for decades with, I believe, a high degree of success. We have a thriving community, we have a strong economy, we have a low unemployment rate, we are shipping money to the state via income and sales tax, of which we get back 18 cents on the dollar. And I think our community is successful in large part because of the investments that are made by local government. Madison should be investing in services to meet the demand of our growing city. And this year, in November, there's a simple choice on the ballot. We can choose to make those investments, or we can choose to back away from them. Year after year of austerity that Madisonians do not deserve will impact the most vulnerable residents in our community. Or we can invest in Madison so it can live up to its full potential. I believe Madison is worth the investment. We have put together a budget that reflects that. I look forward to the conversation with the Finance Committee and the City Council about these investments, and to the continuing conversation with our community about the need to invest in Madison's future and the need to vote yes on the referendum. With that, I'll close and take any questions you might have.
With the service reductions with Metro, what impact do you foresee that having on your team?
So we have given Metro a target reduction number, and they will be working over the coming months to identify what that would look like in terms of exact service reductions. At this point in time, we don't know. We also don't know how many drivers that might impact, or if there would be other impacts across Metro's staff.
Just where I think your team's still undetermined.
That's right. They will have to choose what routes would see reductions in service, or if there's other savings that they can find. Other questions?
Yeah, it seems like most of these cuts are aimed, when you ask the departments to make 1% cuts, it seems like most of those cuts were aimed at the most vulnerable residents of Madison. What are your thoughts about what people presented to you for what they would cut?
So when I asked the agencies for a 5% cut scenario, I gave them fairly clear instructions that they couldn't just propose, for example, to hold positions vacant for a period of a year and get savings that way. That they had to actually really look at their services and propose service reductions, because that's the only way you get long-term lasting savings. I also instructed them to look specifically at who we were serving and to prioritize continued service to the people who need us the most. The unfortunate truth is that our services impact a lot of people across the city, and there is almost no way to reduce service without impacting populations that are vulnerable. But I think we did try, both in the initial cut proposals and in my executive operating budget proposal for cuts to minimize the impacts on disadvantaged communities and to prioritize continuing to serve folks who don't have other options.
The position of the independent monitor was something so long in the making and so much back and forth. What made that sort of a key thing to cut?
Well, so to be clear, in the executive operating budget, we're not cutting that position. It's only in the scenario where the referendum doesn't pass that that office will be fully cut. And I think it just comes down to priorities and what we're able to do in this community. And so in the executive budget, I felt like it was a higher priority to provide library service through the Imagination Center to the Sandburg neighborhood than to continue a high level of funding for an office that frankly hasn't used their entire budget since the inception of the office. So I saw that as an opportunity to redirect funds to a place that they're going to be really needed and will have a very positive upstream impact in preventing violence in our community.
And you said you're looking for this referendum to use it to buy time. What would that look like at the state level? What kind of conversations, if any, have started on that level if this referendum were to pass?
Yeah, great question. So we have met with a number of state legislators already to discuss the budget and the referendum and the things that the state could do to support the city's budget and to create a more equitable budget situation, not just for the city of Madison, but for communities all across the state of Wisconsin. Those have been, I would say, productive conversations so far. We hope to continue those conversations. Obviously, we're getting very close to the November election. The entire assembly and a good portion of the state senate are up for election, and so we don't know yet exactly who we'll be dealing with. As soon as we do, we'll continue those conversations with folks from all across the state. We're also building various coalitions with other communities and groups that are interested in supporting local governments to make the argument that, again, not just Madison, but all of our communities deserve better investment from the state. So those conversations are happening, will continue to happen, but I think realistically, anybody who pays any attention to state politics knows that it is not likely that the next legislature will come in to office and immediately make changes to local government funding formulas. We are going to need at least a year, likely 2, possibly as many as 6, to see real change at the state level. And so we have designed a 6-year plan for the operating budget. If we pass a referendum in November, we can balance the budget for 6 years. And that gives us enough time to work with the state, with the governor's office, and with the legislature to make the changes that we need at the state level. If we can't pass the referendum, we won't have that time. We'll immediately have to make $5.6 million in cuts, and then every year following, we'll likely have to make additional cuts until something happens at the state level. Now, either way, we're going to continue to do the work at the state because that is necessary work. And it is ongoing. It's just what the impact will be on our community in the meantime. And again, I'm hopeful and confident that our community is willing to spend, frankly, just a few cents a day to buy us the time we need to work with the state and to continue to invest in Madison's future.
Going back to the OIM, given the office's problems, why not just eliminate it entirely in a referendum? Does pass and move the available money to someone else?
So the Office of the Independent Monitor was created by the council, and it was created specifically to be independent from the executive branch. So it will be up to the council if they want to undertake the ordinance changes necessary to either make changes to that office or eliminate it. It's not something that's in my purview to do with executive action. You know, one of the things that we were very mindful of in putting this budget together was having the least impact on filled positions. So really trying to avoid laying anybody off. And we've been largely successful in doing that. But again, if if the council wishes to move in that direction, it is going to take legislative action to do so. Anything
You
else?
mentioned monetary. You know how much per household this could be impacting taxpayers if this referendum does pass?
Yes, so if the referendum passes, it's a $22 million referendum, and it's about $5 a month per $100,000 of home value. So if you know what your home value is, you can run that calculation and figure out what it would be for yourself. For the average home in Madison, it's about 60 cents a day. Now, I always like to remind people when I say that the average home is worth a lot more than you think it is. It's almost $500,000.
And this is across assessed values of the homes, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And then you also mentioned you've been having conversations with people on the Capitol. Is that across the aisle, both Republican and Democrat, or who have you been speaking to have these conversations with?
So I can tell you that yes, we have talked to both Democrats and Republicans about the issues,
How have they been
and
received?
will continue to.
Have they been received? You said the conversations have been going forward, but have they been going forward more on one side or the other? Or does it take a certain type of, I guess, strategy to discuss these types of, changes in policy with one party or the other differently?
I think the thing that works in our favor is that the restrictions that the state legislature has allowed to perpetuate impact communities all across the state of Wisconsin. And it is, while it may impact Madison more than many, it is still very difficult for many communities to balance their budgets without either deep cuts or going to referendum. And in fact, what we've seen over the past several years is, I think, 50-something different communities across the state of Wisconsin have had to go to referendum. Right here in Dane County, we know that in addition to Madison, both Fitchburg and Monona are going to referendum, as is the village of Maple Bluff and the village of Oregon. So this is really something that impacts all portions of our state, all different kinds of communities, and perhaps most importantly, in all sorts of different legislative districts. So I think there is a conversation to be had with everyone about the impact on local government and the communities that they represent. And that's why it's important for us to be working with local governments across the state of Wisconsin to build that coalition to get the changes that we need. One more?
So there is, in the event that the referendum doesn't pass, there's a bunch of different stuff in the report. What would this mean for the residents in Madison, if there's something specific that you think talks to the average resident here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if the referendum doesn't pass and we need to make the $5.6 million in cuts, that does impact a whole range of services. So just because we're standing in a library, I'll tell you that it would impact Sunday service at libraries. There would only be Sunday service at the Central Library. And it would, there would be deep cuts to library programming. So essentially there would no longer be programs that were planned by the library that I think many people in our community use and enjoy. We would reduce grants for the arts and for neighborhood organizations. We would reduce our funding for the Downtown Business Improvement District. We would, it would impact building inspection and the pace of building inspection. We would eliminate the ice rinks in our parks, something that I think a lot of people enjoy. We would have fewer city meetings broadcast on the award-winning Madison City Channel. So there's a lot of different things. And we talked about the cuts to Metro already. Both police and fire would be asked to take small reductions, but some reductions. The drop-off sites in streets and the curbside brush collection would be reduced. So I think there's some really substantive things that people would experience, cuts to services that impact people's everyday lives. And that's because we have for over a decade trimmed all of the excess out of the city budget. I mean, I think it's important for folks to understand that ever since former Governor Walker came into office, city governments across the state have been in a situation where the amount that they're allowed to raise on the property tax is less than their cost to continue. So over 3 mayoral administrations, the city of Madison has had a structural deficit. And we have done a number of things to solve that problem every single year, using one-time funds, pushing costs off to our employees, raising other sorts of revenue, cutting services, and we're continuing to use all those tools. The only thing new is that we're using the last tool available to us, the idea of going to referendum. So we have been cutting and finding efficiencies for over a decade at the city. There's just really not a lot of fluff left. And so when we have to make the level of cuts of over $5 million, almost $6 million, you're starting to cut into real programs and real services that your average Madisonian will notice and experience. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
On the budget, it mentions that some funds from public health will be pulled away from less critical programs. Can you just expand more on what those programs are?
Yeah, so public health has a number of small grants that have gone to sort of various health-related things that they feel like are covered either by other funding within public health or from external funding sources, and so aren't needed in the community anymore, and so we're redirecting those funds into violence prevention, which of course is a top priority for our community. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any figures as to how much inflated home values have as to the revenue?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is they don't. Because the amount of property tax that we're allowed as a city to collect is capped to the dollar figure by the state of Wisconsin. So we can only capture a certain amount of money regardless of what the value of property is in our community. And so the impact is that actually, as values go up in the city, the tax rate goes down because the amount that we're allowed to take in dollars is fixed. So we actually have a great explainer that our staff can get to you, but it is a common question. We have all this construction going on in our community. Why can we not benefit from it? That's an excellent question, and the answer is that the state imposes a strict levy limit on us and gives us a literal dollar figure of how much we can raise the property tax. Yeah?
Can you tell us how much the taxes are likely to go up under the levy limit before the referendum kicks in?
So Dave might have the actual number. $83 on the average home. So, and that's the amount that we're allowed under the levy limit is between 1% and 2% a year.
It's closer to 3% this year.
So this year it's a little bit closer to 3%. On average, over time, the amount the state has allowed us to raise the property tax has been in the range of 1% to 2%. Prior to Governor Walker, we were allowed to raise it 3% to account for inflation, and then a certain amount, 1% to 2%, to account for growth. Now we are limited to the growth factor, which if you've been keeping track of inflation lately, you will know is not anywhere close to the increases in costs this year. All right, thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it. Dylan is available if you need any follow-up. And we do have handouts over here that summarize the budget as well. Thank you.